Hello, my Weebies, and welcome back to another Family Channel. I'm Jay Books Corner, and today we are talking about the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Gordon. This is the third series in the Percy Jackson. This is the first one that I think, or fourth series. I guess now it's the fourth because we have the Chalice of the Gods. I don't know what that series is directly called. That's also getting turned into a series with more of those. This one, I will have to say, does have slight spoilers for Chalice of the Gods. So I guess that's the only good place to put in that where that goes. It makes a lot more sense. So if you don't want any spoilers for Chalice of the Gods whatsoever, don't recommend Trials of Apollo. That's where I'm at. So yeah, I'd read that book first, then jump into this one. Chalice of the Gods, you also really need the context of the other books, such as Heroes of Olympus. I would also have to say this one you need the context of Hero of Olympus. This one feels the most so far out of Percy Jackson in itself, so it feels more like a sequel series to Hero of Olympus. I don't know if it's because Apollo was just a character. He plays such a big role in the ending of that series. I don't know if that's the reason why. Who knows? I don't know. I was nervous to start this, and then I realized it was first person, so that made me also really nervous. So let's go ahead and talk about the first book. I'll do a little bit of a non-spoiler review for it. This one follows Apollo as he wakes up and he realizes that he is human. This is not the first time he's pissed off Zeus to do this. At the very end, these are slight spoilers for Hero Olympus. By slight, I mean huge. You know that, but it does play a huge factor into why the books do exist. And so in order for you to understand how he goes on this quest, I guess we can talk spoilers in a second in that regard. Essentially, he wakes up, he ends up meeting a girl named Meg, who they decide that they need to take each other to Camp Half-Blood to keep each other safe. And that's really what the story is, and then it kind of just builds off from there. Now let's jump into some spoilers. I ended up rating this one, I think we're going with a 3.75 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, not as much as I enjoyed Heroes of Olympus and things. I think by the end I was starting to feel that same enjoyment and excitement, but it definitely took until the end for me to feel the enjoyment and the excitement of Heroes of Olympus. This was more on the lines of normal Percy Jackson, a bit darker, but also kind of funny as well. It's interesting seeing Apollo interact with his kids, because he has to, which is kind of funny. His enjoyment. It's also really nice to see Nico and Will's relationship so far progress. That makes me very excited for his standalone, which is coming after I finish these, just to kind of see where that goes even more, and if there is a build off of that here. Did this spin-off come from this series? I wonder. I have a feeling it did. Maybe not, because they're officially not a part of this books that I'm reading. So let's go back a little. So we meet Apollo. He believes that he has been exiled from godhood due to him not watching over the Oracle, who ends up getting kidnapped. It's a whole thing at the very end of Heroes of Olympus, and so he believes that's the problem. Then they're trying to get there. He goes to Percy, realizes that it's been 7 or 8 months past the point of Chalice of the Gods, which is the beginning of his senior year. He is now super far into the senior year because his mother is almost about to pop. So that's one of the bigger spoilers for Chalice of the Gods, is that you realize that his mom is pregnant there. Because a lot of people already knew that, but I was like, oh my god, his mom's pregnant. That was a big thing for me. If I would have read this first, it would have been spoiled. Then it wouldn't have mattered. But he ends up taking him so far, she's like, I cannot go on any more quests. I am questless. But he does pop up at the end for the final battle against the big crazy thing at the very end, which is Apollo just like a statue. Okay, moving on. Very naked statue. That's one of the funniest remarks in the book. He's like, we're just so much prettier when we don't have clothes on, or something. Apollo is a really big narcissist. He's very much full of himself. He makes sure that everybody knows that he's full of himself, and he's trying to figure out how to combat that. But I think the progression of Apollo's attitude and things is pretty funny, and I think his narcissism is kind of funny here. So I didn't find it annoying. I found some remarks to be kind of annoying, but overall, I enjoyed him as a character to follow. Meg also as a character is an interesting one, because she ends up being, the plot twist being here that she was the person. I kind of saw it coming. I actually thought maybe Nero would be her dad, and she lied about her dad dying, but it actually makes more sense for him to being abusive stepfather instead, and I think that's being handled very well, very complexly, which is nice. And I think it's nice for these stories to kind of take on, especially with the interesting take with Gabe in the beginning of the Percy Jackson. So this is almost a progression in that regard. She ends up running away to go find him and basically denouncing Apollo. So Apollo knows that he needs to go and find her, but also to go and save all these oracles, because he soon realizes that's what they're doing. They're trying to kill all the oracles to take the power away, so they can only know, the old gods can only know what the fates are, which is a huge thing. That's bad. And so this starts with the Grove, which were some of the ancient ones. They were going to burn it all down. It didn't end up happening. Then they go and attack the Camp Half-Blood, where most of the story does partake in. Most story partakes in that. Most story also sets up the fact that the labyrinth is still real. They run around the labyrinth. This is how really realize who the villains are. Very, very much flashbacks to early Percy. And I thoroughly enjoyed the whole thing. I didn't really have a lot of complaints, except for some of the writing critiques, some of the language here I didn't agree with fully. But overall, I had a good time. It was a 3.75. I'm very excited to continue on to the point where I've already started the next book, and I'm already enjoying it. Oh my gosh, I forgot the biggest thing. I'm sorry. I'm sure someone's like, are you not really gonna talk about them? I forgot. Okay, they're new. They just popped up. We are on a quest now, so he's on a quest. They officially has a thing. He has to go to all these different places to kind of save all the oracles and collect everybody. Questy quest. But he has to choose his 3, and it is, why is his name escaping me? Nick from the second series, and I don't know why their names. Eclipsis are on this journey with him. They show up at the very end, and they're gonna go over into the Rome, and we're headed to where all the Rome stuff is, which is very exciting. I'm so excited to see all of our characters again. Yeah, that's a big plot point for this one. There's a lot of nice little Easter eggs for people who, it's very rewarding for me putting in all this effort. Okay. The big excited. Oh, did you? As I finished the second one, which I have no idea what it's called, but I do have a physical copy to hold up when I do get there. So, thought you guys saw that. Being excited, let's go ahead and review the second book in the Trials of the Apollo series. Okay, some big truths are about to happen. Get prepared. Hold on to whatever you hold on to. I am not liking this series very much, really at all. This one, I think we're going to land on a 3. Objectively, there's nothing wrong with it, and I think there's moments where it does shine, but I think I'm officially out of this genre. Mythology and everything else. 17 books. Plus, I read quite a few beforehand. I think that's the issue, is I just didn't prepare for the longevity of reading these, and I think that's truly, my brain wants to move on to other things. I have other books I want to read and things, and I'm just kind of here, which is fine. I want to read these, and I know somebody's gonna be like in the comments, okay, then just stop reading them. You don't have to commit to the bit. You don't have to do all the books, which, you know what, that's fair. That's a very fair point, and I could take a little pause, review this last book, and then in a few months come back and finish the last 3. But now my brain's like, no, Jacob, you started it, you gotta finish it. So that's where I'm at. I only have 4 books left overall. It's fine. I'll get there. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Trials of Apollo book 2, I don't really remember. I finished it yesterday. That's kind of where we're at. Apollo himself as a character has little moments of growth, but if you've ever seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is, my current Buffy-a-thon, it's currently on a bit of a month-long hiatus. We're watching this in February of 2024. He's very much like Xander. He learns some life lessons, and then he kind of forgets it 2 minutes later. And so this book was almost like a restart of book 1. I was expecting to have a more fleshed out character, but in reality, we just have the same doofus who's annoying with little moments of humanity. And I'm sure it works for a lot of people, especially for the younger audience who this is written for. I don't want to feel like, oh, I'm like, this is trash, I can't believe it's written, because I don't feel that way. I think it's pretty well written for the most part. I think some of the challenges are pretty cool. The ideas are pretty cool. The idea of him being a father and not knowing it is interesting and very mature, but I don't feel like the book itself is very mature. Also, I'm not gonna lie to you, because I did have to look it up. There is some language in here that just feels kind of racist. And I don't think Rick Warden wrote it to be racist. I don't have oh my god, I just think some of the lines, and this happened in the first book as well, Apollo's voice, Apollo's word choices and things, certain slang that he uses, is very much a part of the black community, and he is white. There's nothing wrong with that per se, but it's just it pops up so often that it's it feels weird to me. It feels weird to me. And it could be the narrator. The narrator really appreciates these words quite a bit. He put a little bit of a tone to it, which doesn't feel very good to me. Doesn't feel very right to me. I think maybe that's the disconnect as well with Apollo, is that I just don't like him as a character very much. But then again, I do in other aspects of it. Also, I don't know how many of these that we can sing our way out of. I would say my favorite part of this book is towards the end of where he's trying to save Meg. So he finds Meg. They have to go find these hippogriffs things from a zoo. Steal them. He realizes that his daughter is kidnapped. He goes and he has a little battle. He saves Meg because she ends up being poisoned. And then there's this really good scene where he's saving Meg, which I enjoyed. They come back out and there's another bigger battle that's going on with Leo and what's her face. And I was really excited for Leo to be a part of this book. I was really excited for this relationship to blossom. But in reality, this relationship between them did not blossom. They just kind of realized that in reality that yes, they're in love, but they're also teenagers. And so episodes just because it's like not the end all be all when you're in love as a teenager. And I think that's also something else that's kind of interesting to explore because it's such a big part of what makes Heroes of Olympus for his character work. It's hard to read. Maybe that's the point of it. I don't know. I didn't really care for the relationship Leo and Calypso's, and I also didn't really like Calypso as a character. I understand where a lot of the points she was making was coming from. I found her to be kind of like nails on a chalkboard most of the time, and I also found Leo to be somewhat more of a dimwit here, which was interesting. He had some smart moments, but like a lot of his choices were kind of dumb. He's never been in a relationship before, and so like I think all these things are factors, and I do agree with that, but I don't know. I just didn't care for it. And then the very end of the book, because they're set on another quest in another 3 days, which I can't really remember what this quest is. I'm happy for the recap in the beginning of the next book. They find Grover. They have a satyr to go on this quest, and Grover's back. And I've talked about this before. I don't think Greg Ward knows what to do with Grover, and so I really hope his story is interesting and really thoughtful and like provoking, just because of the simple fact that I feel like Grover has been the same character since book 3 of Percy Jackson, like 11 books ago. And he's been in a lot of books. It's not like Grover is a side character who doesn't pop up very often. He pops up quite a bit. They talk about him quite a bit. His relationships, they talk about him, you know. I know that he grew up really fast because satyrs like age rapidly as like he in the first book's like 22. By now he's like 30 or 40 or something. And I get that, and that makes it a bit different. But he looks like a 12-year-old. My point being here, I hope Grover is done justice in the next book. And I really hope to see a lot of growth really a lot of growth for Apollo. In my opinion, I kind of like the set back in Camp Half-Blood better than going out on these bigger quests, which was an interesting discovery as well. I did enjoy Apollo realizing that he would die for someone, like fully die. Also, him becoming a god was also an interesting sequence. But once again, it's written first person, so it's not done as well as I want it to be done. I want cool moments, and first person for Rick Warden, they just don't come what I want. Third person Rick Warden, battle sequences were excellent. First person Rick Warden, I'm just like, okay, you're fighting somebody, that's cool. Also it being his son, I thought was an interesting idea. I don't really think it was like fully played out. I do love the bisexual rep. I love how many queer characters are being introduced at a very rapid formation. I don't know how people felt about that, but I love it. So like that's nice. Like he is a bisexual character. A lot of people surrounding him are bisexual characters or people a part of the LGBT community, which I do love being a part. You know, I am a part of the LGBT community, so there is like this. Did it work for you? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm not sure if it worked for me. I'll see you guys all in a quick second when I review book 3, which I think is called The Burning Maze, because we're going back into the labyrinth. Okay, I read the third book in the Trials of Paul series called The Burning Maze, and I figured we can talk about it. I don't have a lot to say, so don't expect a very long review, and that's the definition for this video. I just don't have a lot to say about this character. I enjoy his side characters quite a bit, but let's talk about The Burning Maze. The Burning Maze is going back into the maze, which was introduced in the 4th book, I'm going to say, of the original Percy Jackson series. This is the first series that I can officially say I do recommend you read everything beforehand, in its detriment, though. Apollo as a character is appalling, which I don't know if he was like running with that. He's like, oh, he has to be so appalling because the character is like in the title or whatever. I really don't know, and I really couldn't tell you, but I hate him. I don't hate him. I really don't like him, which is kind of rude, and I'm so hoping that Apollo himself, because of the great loss that this book endures, has great character development from it. I hate the fact that they have to kill off amazing characters for him to get better, but like he is so annoying. And I know some people are like, oh, that's his humor, he's joking, you know, he's not actually like, you know, maybe he is just narcissistic, but like, you know, right at this point it's just like a humor. It's like his crutch that he's going back to, which is true. I do think it is his crutch. Okay, you can't go from a scene, obviously we're in spoiler section, and I'm not really gonna tell you what the plot about this book is. It's essentially they have to go to this guy Caligula, who, oh my god, I couldn't believe that was who they had to go to. Anyway, they go to Caligula to get these shoes to go through the burning maze to save somebody, you know, obviously murder somebody, and you know, we can move forward into the next area, which we're going back to the original camp that was the predominant for book 1, the Romans camp. That's where we're headed. By the way, the big characters here are big side characters, because the first 2 had Leo and his, you know, thing. This one is very prominent with Piper, and it's very prominent with Jason, and we earned some huge developments with those characters, which we'll get into in a second, because that's what I cared about. Meg as a character I also very much enjoyed, and also Grover here is a main character as well. Once again, I just don't like what they're doing with Grover. I haven't enjoyed Grover in like 8 books, so it didn't change here. It's just what it is. I really feel bad for the character. I just don't think Rick Gordon knows what to do with the character, or knows how to really develop the character. I'm sure I'm really out of... I don't know how many people don't like this series, so... And this is basically a hour-long video of me shitting on it because I don't like it. Essentially, they have to go find these shoes, right? And they take Jason with him, and Jason is broken because of everything that he had to go through to get to this point. He is broken. He is gone. And then he dies. And you have Apollo still making all these fucking jokes. And the tone here did not make any sense to me. And I understand that this is YT, and so you have to like walk that balance line. It can't be completely serious. It can't be completely joke filled, because you want serious enough that the characters feel real, but not like too serious that younger kids won't enjoy it. But you also don't want it like too joking to where there is no like really feelings or plot or whatever towards it, right? I get it. I understand. I know how to write a book. I've been there. I just don't think it's handled very well here. I think Apollo as the main character is one of the worst characters to try this out with, because there's such dark themes going on throughout this entire series. I mean, the dude wrapping up in a chainsaw, it was a lot, okay? It was a lot. Jason dying was so stupid to me, and then it meant so much, and then Piper's reasoning, so good. Also, Piper gives me a lesbian vibe. I know, let's talk about it. Okay, so Piper and Jason end up breaking up. That's not in the original books. We hadn't really talked about that up until this point. They end up breaking up. Piper breaks up with him. Jason ends up becoming this like recluse of a person because he ends up finding a prophecy saying that if they go forward with this, one of them is going to die, i.e. someone did die. It's written in stone. Okay, Apollo seems to can't die, but we'll talk about the joking about suicide here in a second. We'll get there. We're not there yet. Also, we'll talk about the fat public comments and stuff. Both those things will be addressed in this video, in this section, because I'm sure I talked about it before, but we'll talk about it again. So he ends up dying, sacrificing himself before, they could get back together, before they could say their goodbyes. Because like Piper is saying like she doesn't really know who she is, and maybe she's asexual. Maybe there's a lot of other stuff going on here. But she was screaming lesbian vibes, and then she came in with a full town of women, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm right. And then her hair gets all singed off, and I was like, ooh, maybe I'm right. Now she's going to Oklahoma, so maybe I'm wrong. Leo ends up stopping his part of the plan, going into this place that we're headed, where they had a battle, and that's all you really need about Leo. Now let's talk about some of the more glaring issues, and then we can talk about like another really positive thing at the end. Once again, I have 0 things to talk about the plot here. Let's very quickly talk about Meg for a second. We learned that both her father and her mother are both goddesses, essentially, and she grew a beautiful tree that they can live in. That's really like Meg in a nutshell. I like Meg as a character. I have no discrepancies with Meg. I think that's probably why I don't have anything to say, because it's like overall, she's a reason why you continue to read these books, not Apollo. So let's talk about Apollo's judginess a little bit. So Apollo makes a lot of comments about his weight in this book, and I'm not a very big appreciator of that. One, I don't like the way the comments are coming across, and I don't like the way they're talked about. So that's my opinion on that. Let's talk about the suicide. Essentially, becoming brave is like a huge part of this novel, even though there's a huge part of the second novel, and yet none of those traits followed over. Yeah, that's my problem. He just keeps resetting, and it's just so pissing me off. But either way, he ends up shooting the arrow into his heart to stop this person from killing all of his friends. But he makes a joke about saying, oh, it's super painful, I wouldn't recommend it. And because this is towards an audience that is younger, we're gonna say Y-teen is anywhere between like 9 to 14 year olds, right? 10 to 14 year olds. That's my best guess, is like the age range that this novel was aiming for. I don't really think it should have been involved. I think it should have probably been cut. I think I understood what he was trying to do here. I just think it shouldn't have happened. I also think Rick Gordon should have figured out a different way. Almost in editing, I could see it in the lines being like, hey, you should have done this differently. Like, I would have wrote it to him being like, hey, you should have done this differently. It did not work for me. I'm sure it worked for some people, but it did not work for me. One last thing I'll have to say is I love him as a bisexual character. I think he's great. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's really funny. I honestly enjoy any type of humor that he brings to the bisexual community. I like all the gay humor. I like all the straight humor. I think that part of him is phenomenal, and I can understand why you don't want to overuse that, but I much prefer it over his narcissisticness that is overused, in my opinion, in these books. That being said, I'm going to go swiftly read the 4th one and the 5th one, so I'll come back with reviews for those 2 as well. Hopefully they're better. I'm waiting on 3.5. Obviously not horrible, but they also killed off a main character, so I don't think I could, unless I was truly pissed off about it, which I'm not, I don't think I could rate it any lower. A 3.5. This is the first one where I thought like maybe a 4. It's a good sign. As long as he has development going forward, I feel like we're on an upwards trajectory here. I don't know what the next one's about. I know obviously we're going into the Roman camp. That's all I got for it. I'll come back when I've done with it. Let's talk about the 4th book. in the Ricordan's Trial of Apollo series. This one is called the Tyrants Tomb. This is the cover. It makes sense. This one is they're preparing for war, preparing for parts of war, I guess. And then it also is going and hunting down this god that they're not entirely sure of, who can take away sound. That god ended up being Hyperia, something along those lines. I don't think it's Hyperia, but it starts with an H. They end up going and freeing him and falling in love, and it's also like this inner thing of showing more like what Apollo did as someone growing up or whatever, or someone as a god, like what the punishments he gave out. There was a girl who he wanted to marry, she didn't want to marry him, he assumed that she just did because he's Apollo, and so he tells her that you will die in a certain amount of time, many lifetimes later, and eventually she is just snuffed out to a single sound and in a jar, and these two gods die together. Lots of death, lots of big death, lots of self-sacrificing death. So let's talk a little bit about that, because suicide seems to be a common topic in this series, and I don't know how I feel. One, suicide to get your job done, like in war, is a very common thing. I just don't think it's necessary in books like this. That's my own opinion, and we can jump into it. Once again, I want to say the age range that they're aiming for here, even though it's a bit darker, I'd say probably like 11-12-year-olds is probably what the age range of this book is, this series. I know I said 9 to 13 before, but I'm narrowing it down as we go through them. Apollo as a character did not see growth until the last 100 or so. I know some people are going to fight me on this. 100 or so pages, in my opinion. There is growth throughout the entire book. I don't want the death of Jason looms over this entire novel and looms over him, but he's still his narcissistic asshole tendencies, but he's doing a lot more things. I mean, he's becoming a better character. He's still the worst part of reading these books, but he's becoming better, and so I do think he possibly could be slightly enjoyable in the final one. I'm so ready for this series to be over. It's definitely my least favorite, and going through and murdering off all the characters from the best series is a choice, Rick Warren. It's a fucking choice. And so the big moments I want to talk about in here is obviously his relationship with oh my god, it's not Hazel. Reyna was so interesting, because Reyna is a character that's sort of found love throughout these books, and them developing this relationship is kind of cute, not gonna lie. Also, the comments about his body really needs to stop. I get it, he's this god who has all these like 18-pack abs and shit like that, and so now he has a belly. I don't like the jokes. There's a lot of them, and it's written in 2019, and so I'm really just saying, what's up with that? That's my opinion. I know it's potty humor, I guess is the way you can describe it, but I think as a society we need to become better at potty humor and really understand what that typically means. And not just potty humor to me, by the way, it's just a broad statement of just making kids laugh, like a fart joke, There's a few of those in here too, which makes sense. We are aiming for an audience. I get that. I'm an adult. I'm 25, so I do understand those things. But the Ella and Tyson stuff was really interesting, really cute, outside of using him as a human tattoo. But I guess he doesn't care, so I guess it's fine. Like, if he cared, it'd be different, but he truly does not care, so I guess it's fine. Frank sacrificing himself and then coming back at the end was, one, I'm not mad, because, like, we didn't go through all this development of Frank throughout those books. That's, like, one of the key things that I very much remember was Frank's development in that series. I can't think of what that series was called off the top of my head. The Heroes of Olympus series, we didn't go through all that just to get to here, and then he dies. And he does die. He burns himself alive. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, this self-need in order to achieve a goal that we learn later on wasn't even going to be the big goal in the end, is sad. It's very true with war. I just don't know if it's necessary to be talking about here. The actual war sequence does take up several chapters, which was very refreshing and very good for Rick Warden, as his writing has gotten better in that regard, I will have to say. It's very long, very detailed. I will have to say the most annoying part about this, other than the fact that Apollo is dying the entire book, which could be the reason why he was a bit more enjoyable, is the fact I just never once believed that he would be able to withstand any of this. I know he's this old god, and he's slowly becoming a god again. We're seeing that birth going on inside these pages. I just don't know how necessary an entire book of this was. But I also don't understand why we keep putting him in these life or death situations when obviously I know that he's going to survive. I mean, next book, I guess there's some, maybe he won't survive. But at least in this book, I know he's going to survive, and I never once felt the stakes of him almost dying. I felt the stakes of everybody else around him almost dying, but never Apollo himself. And that's kind of annoying, because it kind of worked in the favor of Heroes Olympus. It also worked in the favor of Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson was the annoying character for sure. I always believe, because he was a demigod, that there's a way that he could survive this. Because he is just a merely human here, I don't believe it. And it's very annoying to read from. This one had a little bit less of going, find God, solve mystery, come back, like they've been doing. And so that was really refreshing as well. We're back on another journey. We're going back to New York where the first book began. I'm assuming we're going to rope Percy and everybody into this. Assuming Nico and, well, his boyfriend Wasp be roped into it. Those are all things I'm looking forward to. I'll be reading it really quickly, so do not worry. Overall, it was fine. I still don't know how I feel about bringing certain things of war into this, like we talked about. I also can't figure out, I feel like this should be a 3-book series. 2 of these books should have been maybe a 4-book. 5 is really testing the limits, especially with 450-page lengths. I just don't think there's enough development in the characters, and I don't think there's enough development in the story and plot overall for it to be this long. This entire video is going to piss so many people off because I don't like this book. I don't like this book series, but it's fine. We're moving on. We're going to be moving on to the next one. Let's talk about Tower of Nero. I finally finished it, guys. This is the final book in the Trials of Apollo series. It is not the final book in the Percy Jackson Half-Blood Chronicles series. We have one more to go to. That being said, let's talk about this book, which does have Nico and his boyfriend in it. This book is going to be really hard to talk about, really scrunchy, because I'm going to be honest, I don't remember the first 70%. I mean, I kind of do. Like, now I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, ooh, what happened in the first 70%? I'm like, how do I discuss this with you? Because here's the thing, this is another, like, one of those Percy Jackson books that I was in the middle of reading, okay? And then Percy Jackson decided that it didn't want me to finish it. Like, it's so rude. And I was really enjoying it, which was the rude part. Like, I had to read some really clunkers, which we already talked about, to get to this better one. It's not great, but it's still better. So I can really only talk about the last 30 or so percent of it fully with, like, full thoughts on it. But that being said, let's talk about some of the things in the beginning. So the book opens with them, I think, going... They end up getting jumped, I think is what it is, and then they get saved while being jumped by someone that, they end up like on a bus or a train or something. It's like, I think it's a train. Maybe it's a bus? I don't know. This person from Meg's past ends up showing up. She's like a guard. I can't remember her name. She ends up saving them. They end up going to Percy's parents' house. They end up having the baby. So we know that some time has passed. 6 months has passed. Pretty sure the 6 months is what the new books are taking place into. So we get the whole, because we learn that Percy is on a road trip with Annabeth and Grover because he graduated high school and he's going to college and stuff. So like all that stuff is done. Those are pretty big spoilers for the series, the finishing of Percy Jackson. The second book, by the way, in that, it's like 240 pages long. That's going to be a short review when I review it in September, but it will come. I will review it. I'm committed at this point. I'm going to finish them. Just the way it is. I don't know if I'll react to season 2 when it comes out like I reacted to the first one, but we'll definitely continue onwards. Back to Apollo here. They end up getting saved, and then they end up having to go to Camp Half-Blood, and they're sent on this quest. The quest part is where things get a little confusing and a little in my head, because I don't really remember what it is. I remember that they had to go and do something. Like, I know that's really important for Nico's story, but I couldn't tell you what it is. So that's a bit of an issue, but I know they'll recap it for me, so I'm not really that worried. They end up having to go and run around with these, like, people that are bad that Nico ends up finding in, like, the underworld, I'm pretty sure, something of those lines. And there's, like, some conversations about how this is a really tricky time for him because of Jason's death and stuff, and everybody's really dealing with Jason's death still. Interestingly enough, I feel like it was a missed opportunity in the end. I know we're jumping a little bit ahead here in the story. For once Apollo becomes Apollo again in the end, not to talk about what he's going to do for Jason. Like, one of the things I really applauded Percy for doing is that Percy did take the action in the end. And from my understanding, the epilogue, he did not take the action, which I truly do think is a missed opportunity overall. But with that being said, let's continue onwards. They end up having to go do this questy thing, and then they come back to Camp Half-Blood. And in the process here, they agree to get captured, hoping that this person that they ran into at the beginning that he threw off the roof of, which I didn't mention, he throws her off a roof to show that she's on Nero's side. He ends up seeing right past that, but that doesn't really matter. Then having to storm Nero's home. Meg is kind of switched. Her brain's kind of switched. She ends up coming back. They end up killing Nero, and then the snake, which is on the cover, ends up being really the big bad in the end. Nero ends up being a tiny puppy in the big bad world, right? Apollo, with the heart, the arrow, ends up killing the snake, and they end up living, and it's a good time, and no one really understands why they live, but they do live. He's out for 2 weeks, and we have the epilogue, and he goes around, he meets everybody. It seems like him and Hazel are going to start a relationship, which is kind of fun. Or Rachel, him and Rachel, not Hazel, sorry. Him and Rachel are going to start a relationship, which is kind of fun. He ends up inviting Piper, which we learned that she is a lesbian, which is what a lot of people speculated, so that was good. We got the full answer for that. I mean, we didn't need it, but like, It's fun to get the conclusion. Hands Regina and Percy and Annabeth, and they just are like sad about the fact that Jason died, and they briefly talk about what's been going on in their lives. And then he ends up running into Meg, who is basically changing Nero's entire life after he died, with her brothers and sisters, and building this beautiful greenhouse and things, and just having overall good time. Overall, outside of Apollo being Apollo, I do think some of the jokes and some of the long running things for Lester as a character do pay off in like the last like 10%, but I don't know if it was worth it for 5 books. And once again, I'm going to come back to this. I don't really know if this book series should have been 5, especially 5 thick books. I think this could have probably been an equal of a trilogy in my opinion. I know that like I can see what Rick Gordon was trying to do. Rick Gordon was trying to give everybody the closure because I think he had no plans of writing. I think he had plans to write the Nico book that's co-written with somebody else, but I don't think he had any plans to ever come back to the Percy world unless he was telling a different story in Percy's point of view, which he eventually does. I just don't necessarily think, I think this was supposed to be the end, and so he wanted a series that wrapped up everybody's story, that everybody had a through line, which I think is fine. I just wish Apollo wasn't the main character. Apollo had to be the main character. It's very obvious that Apollo had to be the main character. I just think holding all your development until the last 20% of your novel, of your series, is a wild idea. And I know some people are not going to be happy that I said that, and I've been saying that for 5 books now. But seriously, Apollo is exhausting to read from. He had to be exhausting. He had to be fun to write. It was super exhausting to read from. And I've been trying to think, okay, these books are written for 13 to 14-year-olds, right? And I was trying to think, I was like, would these jokes be funny? Would him being such a narcissist and a through-line narcissist be funny? And to me personally, I don't think it would have been that funny as a child. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. I've been half tempted to give all these to my little sister to read. Figure out if she finds them funny, because like I just need a different perspective. I need a child's perspective on this situation, because I just don't know if people find him funny. We will talk about the weird underwear jokes. So I know that underwear jokes are kind of funny for kids, so I'm not going to really think too much into it. I'm sure that's where they're coming from. Constantly talking about them and acknowledging them was a bit weird for me, and maybe they just stood out among the cluster of his mind thoughts. I don't. That being said, let's see where it ranks. What did I give it? I gave it a 4. I do think it's the second best out of the series. I think personally it would go the first one, and then this one, and then I want to say it would probably go the 4th one. And then these are equal. Both of them had enjoyable mysteries to them, and both of them had like a fun, like little, like I said, the quest is kind of fun, but the story themselves I didn't really care for, in the fact that by the 3rd book, which was really annoying, the Apollo was still very much Apollo. And I know there's a part of it that has to be true, because it's like Apollo is Apolloing, but like, that's the series. I don't know if I would recommend. I kind of don't. I kind of think it sucks. That's okay. Let me guys thoughts and opinions down below. I will mention we will have a spoilery vlog coming out for Nico once I get my hands on the book. I'll read it immediately. We'll get that video out for you guys. And then I will have one more video concluding this Camp Half-Blood Chronicles at this point in time, and that is ranking all the books. I have plans to rank it.